Hey everybody, Qroo here, and welcome to Lesson 3 in our series to help you bridge the gap from beginner Spanish to intermediate Spanish. Those first two lessons were, admittedly, a little dry. We had to lay some of the groundwork to using the present subjunctive mood, cover the conjugations, etc. But now that we have that behind us, we're going to really move forward a lot faster. Now, don't worry if you don't remember all of the conjugations that I covered in lessons 1 and 2. It takes time to practice them. And in fact, you're going to get some practice today because I'm going to be showing you another way that you can use the present subjunctive mood. Let's take this show to the stage so we can have a little bit more room to work with. In today's lesson, I'm going to be showing you how to use a subjunctive to describe the unknown or unspecified. At this point in the lesson, you may be asking yourself, what am I going to be describing that's unknown or unspecified? How often am I going to be using this? Well, you'd be surprised. In case you missed it, a little background about myself. I'm a native English speaker from the United States. I learned Spanish on my own as an adult, out of necessity, and I've lived in Mexico for several years, and I speak Spanish every day. I can tell you that this particular construction I'm going to show you is really common. You're going to use it when you're buying things like cars, houses, looking for things, even wanting to hire people to do certain jobs for you. It's really common. Let me show you an example. Let's say I'm house shopping in Mexico and I want to say, I want a house that has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Yo quiero una casa que tenga 3 recámaras y 2 baños. That word tenga should look familiar. It comes from the verb tener, which means to have, and it's conjugated in the present subjunctive mood. Now, the reason we have to use the subjunctive here is because we're not talking about a specific house, so it's undefined. I want a house that has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Now, that second part of the clause is describing that unknown object. The object's a house. The description is that has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. This house may or may not exist. It probably does. But because it's unknown and unspecified, it triggers the subjunctive. Let's compare that to this sentence. I want the house that has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. We're talking about a specific house here. So we would translate that as Yo quiero la casa que tiene 2 recámaras y 2 baños. See, the verb here is conjugated in just the regular present tense you learned, and it's also known as the indicative, and we use that when we're talking about a known item. Now, in English, if I said, I want the house that has 2 bedrooms, or I want a house that has 2 bedrooms, the has, that verb doesn't change. That's why many English speakers don't even realize how important the subjunctive is, and they just kind of skip around it and never really get to it. But in Spanish, it is so important. If this seems a little confusing right now, don't worry. I'm going to give you plenty of examples through the lesson so you can get this construction down pat. But first, I want to start to talk about something that does confuse people. You're hearing me say indicative and subjunctive and things, and you're like, well, I thought I was just learning like the present tense and past, and what is this other thing? And why are you using the word mood with things? So let's talk about that real quickly. Yes, we do have tenses in Spanish, like you do in English, present, past, future, etc. But we also have something else. We also have things called moods that operate within those. So the sentence I just gave you, I want a house that has 3 bedrooms, etc. Now, in those two sentences, everything's been pretty much in the present tense, but I didn't use the same conjugations. So there may be different conjugations. We actually call those moods. So when you learn the regular present tense, you're actually learning the indicative. That's statements of facts, things like that. Well, what we're doing in this course by trying to boost your Spanish to the next level is showing you the subjunctive. And the subjunctive and indicative are going to be interlaced in almost everything you do. They'll appear often in the same sentence, just like you saw in the example. And the third mood on the list is the imperative. You've actually already seen an example of this, if you remember from lesson 1, when I taught you how to say advise me or let me know something, avísame. That's in the imperative mood. We'll be talking about that at length in a future lesson. Let's get back to the lesson at hand. Generally, when we're looking for some kind of unspecified or undefined thing, it's because we're shopping or hiring somebody. I tend to start those sentences with either querer, to want, or buscar, which means to look for. Now, the first part of our phrase will just be in the regular present tense, the indicative. Now you know what that is. I'm looking for a blank that you're describing. Yo busco un or una. It's going to depend on the gender of the item, right? If it's a masculine noun, it'll be un. If it's feminine, it'll be una. Que, that, and that's going to be followed by the subjunctive verb, etc. Or I want a that. Yo quiero un or una blank que blank. If you want to snap a picture of this with your phone or take a screenshot, it might help you later. Before I move on to the examples, I just want to touch briefly on this. If somebody says yo busco, it can mean I look for something or I am looking for something. It can be either one of those translations will fit. It really depends on the context of the situation. There's another grammatical construction that I haven't touched on yet, but you may know. Yo estoy buscando, which can mean I am looking for something. If you feel more comfortable using yo estoy buscando in these examples, feel free. I'm going to be using yo busco. Here's our first one. I'm looking for a car that costs less than 100,000 pesos. Yo busco un coche que cueste menos de 100,000 pesos. You see, costar is to cost, and this is going to be in the subjunctive because we're talking about an undefined, unspecified car. Compare that to this sentence. I want the car that costs less than 100,000 pesos. Now I'm talking about a specific car I've identified. Yo quiero el coche que cuesta menos de 100,000 pesos. See, we use cuesta. That's in the indicative, the regular old present tense you learned when you first started learning Spanish. Here's another one. I want a job that allows me, permits me, to work from home. Yo quiero un trabajo que me permita trabajar desde casa. See, we're talking about an unspecified job, right? I want a job that allows me to work from home, but that job may or may not exist. So when I describe that job in that second clause, it has to be in the subjunctive. Starting to get the hang of this? Let's compare that with this. I want the job that allows me to work from home. Yo quiero el trabajo que me permite trabajar desde casa. Permite, it's in the indicative. See, these terms like subjunctive, indicative, they seem a little intimidating at first, but they're not too bad, right? Not too bad. Here's a useful one for those folks who might want to travel with their pets down to Mexico and stay at a pet-friendly hotel. I'm looking for a hotel that accepts pets. I put admits in parentheses because the most common verb will be admitir. Yo busco un hotel que admita mascotas. It's going to be in the subjunctive. Why? Because I'm not talking about a specific hotel. And once I've identified the hotel, I'll be using the indicative. I'm looking for the hotel that accepts pets. Yo busco el hotel que admite mascotas. Yo busco el hotel que admite mascotas. Remember, those H's are silent. In this sentence, I added a little extra something. I'm actually looking for a hotel that not only accepts pets, but has access to the beach. Both those clauses are going to be describing that unknown item, so those verbs will be in the subjunctive. Yo busco un hotel que admita mascotas, admitas in the subjunctive, y que tenga acceso a la playa, and tengas in the subjunctive. Compare that to this sentence. Where is the hotel that accepts pets and has access to the beach? I'm talking about a specific hotel now. ¿Dónde está el hotel que admite mascotas y que tiene acceso a la playa? Admite and tiene are in the indicative, the plain old present tense, because it's a known thing. This construction is not only useful when describing inanimate objects. In this case, we're going to be actually talking about a dog. I want a dog that listens to me. It's an unspecified dog, so we're going to use the subjunctive. Yo quiero un perro que me haga caso. Now, hacer caso is to listen to pay attention to someone, like to heed them. It's very useful in Spanish. You might want to make a little note of that. And compare that to this sentence where we're talking about a specific dog. My dog doesn't listen to me. Mi perro no me hace caso. This construction works for people as well. Here's a good sentence starter. Yo busco alguien que, and then we're going to fill in, of course, with the subjunctive because we're talking about someone we don't know. Alguien means someone. Now, that's a little difficult to pronounce if you just slow it down at first. Alguien. Alguien. Here's a sample sentence. I'm looking for someone that is reliable. Yo busco alguien que sea confiable. Now, sea right here, that's in the present subjunctive mood, and that comes from the verb ser, ser, which means to be. Once we're talking about a specific person, we're going to go right back to the plain old present tense, also called the indicative. Juan is reliable. Juan es confiable. See? Piece of cake. Now, most of the time I use this type of expression when I'm trying to hire somebody or find somebody with a special skill set or someone to help me with something. So I'm going to give you a great sentence starter that already puts the verb in the subjunctive for you. I'm looking for someone that can do blank for me. Yo busco alguien que me pueda, and then we're just going to plug in the infinitives of a verb. The infinitive is the unconjugated form, so you don't even have to do any work. That's how easy this one is. I'm looking for someone that can teach me Spanish. Yo busco alguien que me pueda enseñar español. When you first start doing this, just go slow like that. Then you can pick up your pace. Yo busco alguien que me pueda enseñar español. See the verb enseñar there? That just means to teach in the infinitive. We didn't have to conjugate it. You can basically plug anything in there. Here's another example. I'm looking for someone that can take me to the airport. Yo busco alguien que me pueda llevar al aeropuerto. Llevar can means to carry, but it's also used a lot when people bring you places, like take you there. Here's a pretty generic one. I'm looking for someone that can help me. Yo busco alguien que me pueda ayudar. If you want to be more specific what they can help you with, you're going to use that exact word, con, which means with in Spanish. Here's an example. I'm looking for someone that can help me with my computer. Yo busco alguien que me pueda ayudar con mi computadora. I'm looking for someone that can help me with this problem. Yo busco alguien que me pueda ayudar con este problema. Instead of using con with and with a noun, you can use verbs. You just have to drop that con and put a little letter a in there, a. And then your verbs again in the infinitive. I'm looking for someone that can help me translate something. Yo busco alguien que me pueda ayudar a traducir algo. Many of the people who take this particular course are people who move from, say, the United States and Canada and come to Mexico and have to learn Spanish. So a lot of times they're looking for someone to help them do things like open bank accounts, get cars registered. So this one might be helpful. I'm looking for someone that can help me open a bank account. Yo busco alguien que me pueda ayudar a abrir una cuenta bancaria. Now, I really slowed that down to emphasize that little a after ayudar, but when you actually say it in regular speed, that a will just get eaten up by that abrir. Yo busco alguien que me pueda ayudar a abrir una cuenta bancaria. Well, that's it for today. Hopefully you're starting to get used to some of these scary grammatical terms like subjunctive and indicative, and now you know there's moods in Spanish. Again, don't let it overwhelm you. It's actually the grammatical terms that seem to scare people. Now you know that you have this indicative and this subjunctive, and they run hand in hand. You already know so much more than most beginning students, and even a lot of intermediate students overlook the subjunctive. Now, you're not going to get better at Spanish if you don't practice. So try to come up with your own sentences and start to use these constructions during the day. Just try to think, would this make sense? And if you're not sure, if you type a portion of a phrase or your sentence in Google but put it in quotes, you may find it actually in a website. That kind of gives you some reassurance that you're on the right track. Well, that's it for today. Hasta luego.